Welcome to the PreSnap Podcast presented by LineStar. All things fantasy football with a sprinkle of sports betting. Alongside Tyler Weeman, I'm Shannon Somerville. Tyler, we are ready to go for week 8. Ready like Russell Wilson is after doing some high knees and workouts on his 8-hour plane ride from Denver to London while his teammates were sleeping on the plane. He was getting after it.
I am so glad he's going to London. We don't have to deal with him on this slate. We don't have to talk to him, and we're still talking about him. His stupid high knees.
We sure are. Just working out, getting it done. Certainly the butt of jokes. Twitter had a field day with that one.
It is wild how he literally came into the season as everybody's like, oh my gosh, he's going to be such a difference maker. Now he's a meme.
My question to you is, if you're one of his teammates that's trying to sleep while he's running up and down the aisle, would you tell him to sit down?
I likely would have started a pillow fight.
All right, well, no pillow fights on the flight. Yeah. However, I guess we don't know for sure what happened on that flight. We just know what Russell Wilson said. So,
well, did you see KJ Hamler did say no BS? So it is confirmed. He really was doing that. He is just an idiot.
Well, Russell Wilson may be having a little regression this season.
Did you see the press conference about him like talking about that he was doing it too?
No, I didn't.
Oh, he was like so excited, like it was like a good thing, you know, and like he was just all like pumped up. Meanwhile, just everybody's making fun of him.
Yep.
Like he's just so oblivious to the temperature of the room. Like,
so he's had some regression this season, certainly been a disappointment for the Broncos. You know who hasn't been a disappointment, though? Quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, who's going to lead off our daily fantasy projections for week 8. And he's going up against the Detroit Lions. Despite missing those 2 games, he's still yards per game 259 and 261 against Pittsburgh in his first game back. That 259 per game still ranks 11th, which is crazy. What do you think about his prospects against the Detroit Lions, who are 31st in DVOA? Their defense has not stopped anybody.
Their defense hasn't stopped anyone. And Detroit is allowing 34% more fantasy points to quarterbacks when home. Mm-hmm. So we can expect some scoring here out of the Dolphins. Lions ranked 28th in allowing 1.9 touchdowns to passing touchdowns here. So I expect Tua to look good. He's going to look great. He has Waddle. He has Hill.
Right.
Plenty of weapons to make some stuff happen.
Well, Jalen Hurts also has some weapons this week going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The third best odds to win the MVP this season. He's having an incredible season. He's averaging 301 pass and rushing yards on the season. Going up against Pittsburgh, middle of the pack defense for them. What do you make of his spot in daily fantasy?
Yeah, I really like his spot here. The one thing that worries me, and this has been a thing all year long with the Eagles here, is that they rank towards the top of the league as far as pace of play and passing over expectation in the first half of games. And then in the second half, they slow it down. They've had a huge lead, and they've played really slow. Mm-hmm. So we could see that again. We saw Josh Allen really go nuts against the Steelers, but the Bills don't take their foot off the gas. The Eagles do. So Hurts may have to score all of his points early in this game, but I do like him. This Pittsburgh Steelers pass D isn't great, allowing 282 passing yards, 1.9 touchdowns. And they allow 53% more fantasy points to quarterbacks when away.
The Steelers team also not to be trifled with, though. They did just upset the Bucs and sent Tom Brady into an absolute tirade on the sidelines recently.
The one thing to also consider here is I know TJ Watt has been designated to return. Okay. So just make sure he's not back. As we know, this defense is way different with TJ Watt.
Exactly. Such a game changer there for the Steelers. And another game changer you're looking at, Kirk Cousins. Why are you looking at him for daily fantasy this week?
I really like this Minnesota offense. We talked about it all offseason that they're going to be higher paced. They're going to be throwing the ball more. And they have been throwing the ball more, but they just haven't had their huge breakout game and it is going to come soon. Nobody's on Cousins. We don't have, all the great quarterbacks on this slate like we have had in some others. This is one of the higher pace games, one of the higher game totals. And Arizona on D, allowing 1.9 passing touchdowns per game, ranked 23rd, allowing 255 pass yards. Kirk Cousins is above average quarterback, even if people don't want to think he is.
Was I perhaps a little generous with the term game changer?
Yeah. But he is a solid quarterback, and this is a good spot for him to succeed.
And now let's take a look at some of the running backs. We've got some good ones with some great matchups, including Raiders' Josh Jacobs going up against the Saints. He's just had an unbelievable season. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like he doesn't get talked about as much, and he's actually on the verge of history. He could become just the 5th player in NFL history to rack up at least 150 scrimmage yards and a rushing touchdown in 4 consecutive games, and that is something that hasn't been achieved in 16 years. Going up against the Saints, who are 19th in rush DVOA, he could have a huge game.
He could have a really good game. Really, the thing is here that the way Jacobs is playing, he should be the most expensive running back on the slate. But he's still quite a lot cheaper than Henry, Barkley, CMC. He's getting all the workload you can imagine. But the real nice thing is over those last week, he's actually been targeted and catches passes too.
Right.
So it just gives him way higher floor. Also, I think you got to like Jacobs again.
You also got to like Saquon week in and week out. The Giants running backs been on a tear going up against the Seahawks this week. 103.7 yards per game. That ranks 3rd in the NFL. And the Seahawks 17th in rush DVOA, 31st in pass DVOA versus running backs, which is probably a key factor in this one. I'm sure you're going to bring that part up. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a big part. They've really got gashed through the air to the running backs. Several of them have really just destroyed them there. So that's a big part of it. Seattle's also allowing the 23rd in 0.8 rush TDs per game. As we also talked about, they're bad through the air, so they're not great in stopping touchdowns on the ground or on the air. Barkley can do it all. Barkley scored over 20 fantasy points last week without a touchdown. He's one of the few guys in this league that can do that consistently. And we haven't seen another blow-up game since week 1. I think it's coming, and this is a great spot for it.
Averaging 25 receiving yards a game, and the Giants are just throwing everything in there. They're going to get Saquon the ball.
He's their offense.
It's crazy. He is their offense, and their offense, everything goes through him week in and week out. Now let's take a look at Tony Pollard. The Cowboys are going up against the Bears this week. What do you make of this play?
So Zeke Elliott has been missing practice, and this is not a usual thing for Elliott. Elliott has missed like 4 practices in his whole career, and when he does, he usually does miss a game. Pro Football Doc is saying that he expects Zeke to miss and probably miss for multiple weeks. And if this is the case, Pollard then is going to get all the work he can handle. He is a good running back. He is explosive. We know that. He's probably a little underpriced for the workload that he would have. And the Bears matchup isn't that bad. It sounds a little scarier than it is, but they're 27th, allowing 115 yards. Rush yards, and they allow 17% more fantasy points when they're away.
You've seen Pollard really rack up some of the yardage when Ezekiel Elliott isn't in the game.
Yeah, and he's kind of like, Kenneth Walker or Etienne, where he can really bust open a big play, and he does it a lot. So I like Pollard. He could get a ton of work. If Zeke is out, he's probably going to be one of the chalkiest pieces on this slate, but for good reason.
Well, for good reason, we're always going to be looking at Arizona Cardinals wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins this week going up against the Minnesota Vikings. Last week in his first game back from his suspension for PEDs, he had 10 receptions on 14 targets for 103 yards, 47% of the target share. Kyler Murray going to him early, often, basically all the time, and going up against a Vikings defense 31st in DVOA versus wide receiver 2 or 1 in this case. What do you think?
I really like Hopkins here. So the Vikings also rank 30th in allowing 193 yards per game to the wide receiver. And Hopkins worked out of the slot a ton this game, which I think is very important. When he's out of the slot, he is going to be targeted nonstop. Murray has targeted more out of the slot a ton. More will be moving to the outside, which is probably bad for him and even extra good for Hopkins. And I just really like this spot for Hopkins. If he's going to be in the slot, just keep looking for those 14 target games like he did last
time. Hear that as an owner of DeAndre Hopkins in my fantasy league who sat on my bench for 6 weeks, but I think it's going to be worth it.
I think it will be too. And I like that game as a whole. We already talked about how Kirk Cousins in a good spot. Kyler Murray is too. I think this game could go over, and it is already one of the higher game scores of the week.
Another dynamic wide receiver, Tyreek Hill, the Cheetah, going up against the Detroit Lions this week. Leads the league in receiving yards. It's just been incredible, very explosive, and going up against a Detroit Lions defense that is 30th in pass DVOA versus wide receiver 1s. Good spot for the Cheetah.
It's a really good spot for him. And I don't think enough has been made about Tyreek Hill's year. He's had 2 weeks where he's had 29 or more fantasy points and didn't score a touchdown that week. Like, it's insane to be scoring that much without a touchdown. And when he has had a touchdown with those big weeks, they've been 40-plus point weeks. So I think this is another prime spot for him. Tyreek Hill can absolutely crush the Lions. He's having a monster year. You already talked about that matchup. But Detroit is also allowing 40% more points to shorter wide receivers. Yeah. It's a very weird stat, but it's true. They're allowing 1.2 touchdowns a game to the wide receiver. I like Hill.
Teams in general just racking up the points against Detroit Lions. Anytime some team is playing them, you're always looking at, the players that you could stack in there
except
against
CeeDee Lamb.
Except CeeDee Lamb. Well, another awesome wide receiver that's on my fantasy team, by the way, is wide receiver for the Vikings, Justin Jefferson. This week, he's going up against the Arizona Cardinals, 109 yards per game. That ranks 3rd in the league. Is my man Jefferson going to have a good game?
I really like Jefferson this week. Like I've said with Kirk Cousins, this team is going to have a huge breakout week soon. And when that happens, it's going to be on the back of Jefferson. And this is a great spot for Jefferson to carry that load. He averages 70% more fantasy points in a dome. We are in a dome this week. It is a poor defense they're going against. I really like Jefferson.
Liking the Vikings, too. As we said before the season starts, they're going to win their conference.
Yes, we did say that. I like that game. I think you can stack Kirk Cousins. You can run it back with Hopkins. You can get a lot of that game's points just by that.
Another maybe undervalued wide receiver this season is New Orleans Saints wide receiver Chris Olave this week going up against the Raiders. And Olave is averaging 82.5 receiving yards per game. That ranks 9th. He's a top 10 receiver. What do you make of his matchup this week against the Raiders?
Raiders are ranked 23rd in allowing 169.1 receiving yards to the wide receiver over the last 9 weeks. He is the unquestioned number 1 wide receiver on this team. He has been targeted a ton. He had 14 targets last week. This is another game that is high scoring. Raiders do not scare me. And look, Andy Dalton has looked his way a lot, and they're going to just continue going to him. He is a very good receiver, and he's not getting quite the respect he should.
Give him some respect.
Put it on his name.
Let's take a look at our tight ends. The first tight end we're looking at is Philadelphia Eagles tight end Dallas Goedert this week going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, he's had a great season. I know he only put up a few what did he put up? 7 last week? Maybe that's Noah Fant. Anyways.
Last week he was on a bye.
Yeah, gotcha. So he didn't put up any points. So I am correct in that one. So he's been having a great season. A lot of that maybe has to do with the fact that they've got more weapons. So he's got more opportunity to create some space in there. Going up against Pittsburgh, they are 9th in receiving yards, 2 tight ends. What do you think of this play?
So I like Goddard. Goddard has been doing a lot with not a ton of targets. He's putting a lot of yards on the board every single week, but he really needs to find the end zone. I think this is a great week for him to get into the end zone. He is, however, going a little bit high owned.
Okay.
So I'm not fully on board, but I do like the play.
A little bit lower owned guy is going to be Seattle's Noah Fant going up against the New York Giants this week. He's 23rd among tight ends in yards, and he's coming off, this is the guy who's coming off just 7 yards last week. However, he had over 40 the previous 2 weeks. What do you think of this play?
So it is just a low-priced dart throw. We have DK Metcalf that's likely going to be out this week, which Metcalf opens up a huge target share. Thinking more targets will go into the tight end, especially if they're in the red zone, because we know little Tyler Lockett is not going to be jumping over guys to catch touchdowns. However, Noah Fant can. The Giants rank 25th, allowing 55.1 receiving yards at the tight end, and they allow 20% more passing attempts to win away. So I think the matchup goes into his favor, and he's super cheap and could come into a bigger target share.
Okay, I know you have a fade this week because when I was going through my props, I asked you what you thought about this particular player, and you were like, nope, don't do it. He's got you burned, I think, a few times.
Rest in peace, Kyle Pitts. I can't do it. I think it is time to put him to rest for this year. The Falcons went down 21 points, and they still didn't throw. His fantasy outlook for this year is just nothing. Like I can't trust him. When they're down by that much and they still don't throw. It's time to put him in with the Cole Kmets of the tight end world.
Sometimes those Florida Gators, they just crash and burn like they're
him.
Going to do this week against the Georgia Bulldogs.
I dropped him in our fantasy league this week.
It's a bold move, but what are you going to do?
Can't do it.
Can't do it.
He has been, I think it was ran 58 routes over the last 5 weeks. And last week, there's a ton of guys that ran more than that in 1 week.
It is frustrating for fantasy owners because you do know the talent level is there. Yeah. Is it just that they're not utilizing him in the right
Absolutely.
ways?
They're not utilizing him. Well, I don't know what this team's doing. Right. So they spent a number 4 pick on Pitts. The next year, what was it, an 8 on London or 7? It was something like that. So it was a top 10 pick on 2 different pass catchers, and they just don't throw the ball. They threw the ball 13 times while they were down heavily the entire game.
And it's crazy, too, because the Falcons haven't been bad this year. I mean, look at them. They're, tied atop the division?
Yeah, they've been
Bucks?
competitive.
Yeah.
And they've been in the game every week. I think last week was the first time that they haven't beat the spread all season.
You're a nice little upset pick for, maybe not this game, though.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at some defenses we're looking at this week. We're looking closely at that Patriots-Jets game. We're actually looking at both defenses in this one. However, I do have to tell you, Tyler, statistically, the Jets are ahead of the Patriots in a lot of defensive categories. They're 10th in DVOA. They're 10th in rushing DVOA, 10th in pass. They're actually pretty consistent. It's basically, they're a top 10.
Yeah, and I think Patriots are in an okay spot here. Losing Hall is going to be a big blow to the Jets here. Might make them throw a little bit more, which you don't really want if you got Zach Wilson behind the center.
And that is where the Patriots excel 5th in pass DVOA.
Yeah. So, but the Patriots are coming in pretty high owned on DraftKings, so I'd probably be totally against going there. On FanDuel, I could see it, but I don't love it.
Nobody wants the sauce. Come on. Jets defense.
The Jets, however, I can absolutely totally get behind.
Okay.
At home, low-scoring game. They're cheap, no ownership. The defense has done well. So I'd ride that train.
How about the Commanders at the Colts this week? An interesting matchup. You've got a backup quarterback for the Commanders and Taylor Heineke going up against who's even starting for the it's Ellinger.
Yes.
Because Matt Ryan, you're done.
Benched
you're
Matt
done.
Ryan. I don't know who said it, but somebody on this show said that Matt Ryan's not
You
that
did.
good preseason.
Gotta hand it to you.
But it's really the fact that the Commanders are going against a guy getting his first start. He played 4 years in Texas. He was still a 6th-round pick. There's a lot of tape on him. I don't love his fantasy appeal or his upside, and I think the Commanders D could capitalize on it.
All right. A lot of great picks there for you to contemplate as you're creating your daily fantasy roster for this week in week 8. All of our information, stats available at linestarapp.com. Lineup Optimizer. We also have a props edge tool that can help you dominate the sports books and just crush those props out there. We want you to win money. So linestarapp.com will help you out with that. Tyler, now it is time for our touchdown calls of the game. What do you have for an anytime touchdown in week 8?
You know, I've been trying to go off the board a little bit lately. My guys haven't gone in, so I'm just going Saquon Barkley this week. He is getting a huge workload. RB's been crushing Seattle. They're allowing 0.8 rushing TDs per game to the running back. Barkley's going to run one in.
I'm going with Nuke Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins is getting a touchdown. And he had 10 receptions on 14 targets last week, 103 yards, going up against a Vikings defense that's allowing the highest opponent red zone percentage at 80%. That's really high. So I'm definitely going DeAndre Hopkins in this one. Also, Minnesota Vikings ranked 31st in opponent DVOA versus wide receiver 1. He's going to have a field day against these Vikings, or he could.
He could.
I think at least he's going to score his first touchdown of the year in this one.
And
that means that helps.
Justin Jefferson could come through.
Yep, could happen. And both of them are on my fantasy team. So get both of them going this week.
You're not playing me, so I don't care.
Let's take a look at our prop bets this week. Where are you going for a prop bet?
We've talked about him on the prop show almost every week, I think. I'm going back, Derrick Henry over 97.5 rushing yards. That number has finally came up a little bit. However, I still love it. He's averaging 25 carries a game over the last 4 weeks. His career average is 4.8 yards a carry, and he's facing a Houston Texans team allowing 135 yards a game. I think Derrick Henry is going to go over pretty easily.
I'm going Steelers wide receiver George Pickens over 38.5 receiving yards. That is at -125 in the sports books. Tyler, you knew I had to go with a Georgia Bulldog on the week of Georgia, Florida. But for good reason. I've got stats to back it up. He's gone over 68, or he's averaged 68 over the past 4 games. And even though that Phillies defense, they're good, he still put up 35 at least against Buffalo and the Jets, who are both top 10 in DVOA. He's a beast, okay? He can hit that prop in one catch. He's had over 23 yards, a 23-yard reception in 5 of 7 games this season. Last week, he had a 30-yard reception. And the dude is an acrobat. He's putting up Cirque du Soleil catches every single week.
He is crazy. I really wish he had a good quarterback to throw him the ball. It's nice though. You're going with the Bulldog. We put to rest the Florida player. You know,
it's a good week.
You're happy about it.
Good omens.
You don't even care what else
for the Bulldogs,
happens now,
right? Huh? So, nonetheless, take Pickens over 38.5 receiving yards. We got some upset picks this week. Where are you headed with yours? Your game picks?
Do I go? Which one do I go with? I'm going to go with the Washington Commanders versus the Colts. Mm-hmm. I don't think the Commanders should be underdogs here. Mm-hmm. I know the Colts are at home, but we have a guy getting his first start under the quarterback. Colts have been a mess all year. So let's go Commanders to win one out.
I'm taking the Rams. Although I'm a little nervous about this particular one, you know what? I got the Rams in this one. They are home underdogs, which is quite surprising from the former Super Bowl champions to an underdog at home. Are you kidding me? I'm taking the Rams in this one. Plus, they've had an entire week to prepare for this game against their arch rivals, the 49ers. 49ers coming off that loss to the Chiefs, where they didn't look great on offense. So I think, give Sean McVay a week to prepare for this game, and they could be scheming a game plan to get that win.
And their issue all season has been that offensive line. Getting another week to try and get healthy and figure out that scheme could do a lot. So I see your pick being wise.
You're saying there's a chance.
I am kind of surprised you didn't pick your Jets, though. That was the other one I
haven't picked my Jets this season because I'm worried it'll jinx it. That's the sole reason.
No, you picked them once.
No, you picked them.
You did too.
I swear I didn't. We're going to run back the tape because I swear
I thought you did. I thought you did. I know I have.
Well, I'd be happy if the Jets pulled off the win this week because, of course, Johnny gets some ice cream. The Jets kid reporter.
Got to do it for Johnny.
We'll get a ice cream every week that the Jets win. So do it for Johnny. Everybody wants ice cream. I'll even buy you some ice cream if the Jets win. You an ice cream fan?
I like it.
What flavor are you rolling with for your ice cream?
Mint chip or cookies and cream are my two go-tos.
I'm classic. Classic vanilla.
Classic
nothing
vanilla?
else.
Man, you're boring.
I am really boring.
How did that happen?
All right, that's going to do it for today's PreSnap podcast. Remember, if you're watching us on YouTube right now, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, sign up for notifications. We'll see you guys next time. Good luck on all your sports betting, your daily fantasy. Go win some money. Week 8, let's go.
Have a good one, guys. Bye.